Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Yeah, Rick.
Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Harris, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi, and good morning. I'd like to thank the committee and anyone else involved for inviting me to the Rogue Roundup. This is the first time I've been asked somewhere, so you're taking a big chance here. I had different color hair and a different last name and a different state that I came from, but my story is the same, and it's nice to be here again. Today is May 2nd, and that probably doesn't mean a lot to most of you, but to me, I didn't even realize it till this morning. I called a friend of mine who is celebrating a 10th birthday in Long Beach, and after I got off the phone with him, I realized that 17 years to go today, on May 2nd of 1975, I was committed to a hospital for alcoholism and drug addiction. And I was 17 years old, and I had no idea that at this time I would be introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous as a result of this. And so today means something very special to me. It was the beginning, although I didn't know it, I guess the beginning of the end, because I wouldn't stay sober from this day on, 17 years ago, but it introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a way of life that I live today to the best of my ability, and it's the only way of life I want to live. Can you understand me okay, or does it sound funny? Okay, I'm getting something. But there are three things that I like to start off telling you about myself, because these are the three things I like to know about you. And because I find that if I have these three things in place in my life, that my life operates a lot better. It's not that I manage it better, I just seem to accept whatever life decides to give me a lot better. First is a sobriety date. My sobriety date is February the 8th, 1976, which means I've been sober a little over 16 years. Now, that was not my first sobriety date, but it is my last one. And if you are new in Alcoholics Anonymous and don't have a sobriety date, I encourage you to get one. To me, a sobriety date is the absence of everything, because the last thing I ever took that was mood-altering was one lousy joint. And to me, my sobriety, I only have one sobriety date. I couldn't keep up with two or more. I keep my life, as much as I like to get into detail, the simpler I keep the things in my life, the better. And so I only have one sobriety date. And I hope that you don't poo-poo your sobriety date. Well, it was sometime back in August, I think.
And the reason I hope you don't is because we all need that basis to stand on. I needed some place, some definite place to start from, some place to lay that first brick. And I also believe that it's the absence of everything. I don't think there is any non-habit forming Valium. I don't believe in social pot smoking, or I don't even fool around or even think about fooling around with ridiculous things like near beer. Why would I want to do that? I don't ever want to stand up and take a cake in my home group for a period of sobriety thinking in my mind, I wonder if I should have counted X. If there is one thing that I have to have in my life that is of absolutely above reproach, without question, untainted, it has got to be my sobriety date. I have seen too many people live with a lie on the inside, knowing that they did not deserve the amount of time they were taking credit for. And I don't ever want to do that. So I hope that you will take your sobriety date seriously. Also, the second and third thing to me are equally important. I just can't say them at the same time. But one of those two things is a home group. And my first 4 years of sobriety, I was a member of the 12 by 12 group in Minneapolis. For the next almost 7 years, a member of the Skyline group in Atlanta. And for the last 5.5 years, a member of the Bellflower Big Book group in California. And I have always had a home group. This has not been for the home group's benefit, it has been for mine. It has been important for me because I am a born taker, and what's in it for me to have a little job, somehow make that contribution. So in my own mind, I've earned my seat for that night. Now, I have not always been the best member of each of those home groups, but I have always had that to attain to. I've always had another meeting to try to be that at. And I believe in a home group. It allows me to learn how to be one among many, that the group conscience is important, and that's what I go with. Whether I like it or not is irrelevant. It's important for me to stay. If I see changes happening in my group, I have a responsibility to make sure that the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous are upheld and that it is not left to a situation where I just leave instead of try to stand the ground that it was based on. I have to stand up for the principles and traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have to pass them on. And the third thing is a sponsor, and I've had 3 different sponsors because I've lived in 3 different states. I believe in local sponsorship for myself. That's the only reason I've changed sponsors. I did not have my first official sponsor, and I say it that way for a reason, till I was 3 years sober. And the first 3 years, I was very close and hung around and was in the shadow of the old-timers. And I think it was because of my involvement in activity with and around them that I had those examples to follow. But I had heard, get a sponsor, and I just didn't know what I should be looking for. And of course, I wasn't asking. And I would get someone who was maybe only sober 6 months longer than myself, or maybe someone who was a friend. And in my situation, that does not work well. I need someone who's a number of years longer than myself, someone who's lived in the trenches I'm about to jump into and has lived to tell the tale. And I spoke with my sponsor yesterday at length, and I see her and am in touch with her on a regular basis. And the thing about sponsorship that I've learned is the relationship is based on my actions. I'm the one who needs to make the calls. I'm the one who needs to keep her up to date. It's not her job to make sure I'm all right and to call me. No. That's my job to do something with the relationship. So those 3 things. So if you are new here today, I welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you are returning, I hope that you'll try it our way, because my way and your way has never worked. And I also, though I welcome you if you are new, to the people who have been sober longer than I want to thank you, because you were here and kept the doors open wherever I was, so that when the day came, which I didn't know when or if it ever would, when I came here, it was open. And I hope that I know that the newcomers are the lifeblood, but let's not forget the old blood. Let's not forget the respect due to the people who were sober when we got here. I had my first drink the same night as my first drunk. If I had a drink before that, I don't remember it. And it would be on a Friday, and it was Friday the 13th of April of 1970. And I was 12 years old. That makes me 34 today, so we'll get the numbers out of the way. I know I'm always figuring it out, so... So it's as if my life has been in three completely different phases. The first phase, pre-drink. My life seemed, I related very much to many things that Polly had said. I was an only child. I lived in Middle America. I was raised in small towns in South Dakota. And, it couldn't have gotten any more mid-America apple pie. My father went to work and my mother stayed home and baked bread, and I was raised in a Catholic school. I was raised up with Catholic religion. I never saw violence in our home. I never heard violent conversations. I never saw a piece of furniture thrown through the room in a drunken rage. I never saw my parents beat each other up. I never saw anybody drunk. I'd be the first person I saw drunk. And as a friend of mine in my home group says, if my environment would have predicted whether or not I'd be an alcoholic, I wouldn't be an alcoholic. That was not the kind of situation I came from. And yet, I'm 12 years old. It's basically a normal growing up, curiosity, wanting to be accepted by people and peers situation. And different people are attracted to different groups. Some are attracted to the athletically inclined. Some attracted to those academically inspired. I don't know. I was attracted to the people who drank and those wild kids. And my father will always believe he finally got me away from that crowd. It's only been 16 years since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, but he finally got me away from that crowd. Okay, whatever you say. But I wanted to get with that crowd, and they had invited me to a party, and it was this upcoming Friday, and I could not wait. It was like, my debut. I was invited to this party to be amongst these people, and I had heard them talk about drinking. I don't recall them talking about getting drunk. I just remember talking about drinking, and by God, I'm going to get drunk. Somehow I decided that getting drunk was the most or the best or the highest you could do, and I looked at this as my one shot, my initiation, and I better do it right. And so when I arrived at that party at 6 o'clock on Friday the 13th of April of 1970, I had no idea how my life would change. And it seemed as natural to me as breathing. There did not even seem to be a difficulty in transition. It seems like it was supposed to be. You see, I felt like a normal 12-year-old, whatever those are, but I did not feel the rigors of life, and I can't wait to get out of this household or anything like that. And yet that would be the way I felt after my first drink. The only way I saw people drink was my parents. They were, a term I understood in Alcoholics Anonymous, social drinkers. They would have company over. They needed a reason to drink. And so they would have their guests over. They would take down that dusty whiskey bottle, but God knows how long it had been up there, uncap it, pour their guests a drink. They'd put in ice and mix and foo-foo and whatever, recap it, and shelve it for another undetermined amount of time. And they would drink that drink all night long, and they'd have dinner, and they'd play cards, and then they'd have coffee because they're driving home, And and that was how they drank. Nobody jumped up on the tables. Nobody broke out the windows. These people did not have a personality change. And that was the way I saw people drink. Now, I have never drank like that. I'd be embarrassed to drink like that. I mean, yeah. And yet that was my role models. I have never been interested in drinks with fruit and umbrellas. I am serious when it comes to drinking, and I know that. And that was the way they drank, and yet what would become as natural, to me, as this was to them, is that within a very short period of time, my idea of drinking was taking that fresh whiskey bottle, uncapping it, and throwing it away because I'll never need it again. That's the way I drink. That's the way I like to drink. And yet, I don't know where that came from. There is no alcoholics in the line. Wherever it came from, I have no idea. I had arrived at that party at 6 o'clock, and it would set the pattern for my drinking. I took, when you're 12 years old, it's like a liquid potluck. Everybody sort of brings something, and you mix it up, and you pass it around. And when I had that first drink go down, it burned, and I thought, that's good. That means it's working. And I did like it. It just made it important. And when it went down, I started to feel something different on the inside. It felt warm. And it just felt like everything was getting filled up down there. And I didn't know that I'd had a gut full of hot rocks till I started to hear them sort of cool down in there. And I didn't know I had knots all over inside until they started to untwist themselves loose. And I liked what was happening here. I started to feel warm on the inside. And that second drink, when I put that one down, I realized, as I look back, how the change began to happen. Because I had arrived at that party nervous, and I hope everything's going to be okay. And I just, oh God, this is my debut. I hope I don't blow it. And after a few of those drinks went down, it's sort of like you straighten up your shoulders and you think, aren't they glad I'm here? It is such a change for me. And Clancy puts it in the shortest amount of words that most precisely described what happened to me, and I didn't know it until I heard them. It instantly changes my perception. Now you see, it doesn't do that to my father, but it does it to me. And this was the way I liked the change. I drank I drank as fast as I could. It did not seem to be coming fast enough. I blacked out for the first time that night. I passed out for my first time. I came to with my first case of the dry heaves. And I had already been drugged from the party by 9 o'clock that night. And I wanted to go back to the party because, God, I'd had a good time. Now, who knows what happened, but I'll find out eventually. I mean, people are always glad to tell you what happened in blackouts. But I had gotten drunk. That's what happened. And I loved it. And from that day to the day I came into Alcoholics Anonymous 16 years ago, not one time did I give a second thought to anything I ever did, or felt, or thought regarding alcoholism. It was, everything surrounding it was as natural to me as breathing. And it amazes me when I look back at it because I didn't have anybody in my life who did those kinds of things. I didn't have anybody to point to. I'm not going to be like that, or I'm going to be like that. It just was natural. And because it was my first and only experience, I assumed everybody had this happen to them. But you see, was the only little kid that got drunk that night. I didn't know it. I thought they all did. My drinking, I couldn't wait to drink again. It became the number one thought in my mind. It amazes me how in such a short period of time my attitude began to change, because it had always, before that, been important to be a good daughter, to be a good student, to obey rules, to do well, to be nice to people. And now I just acquired a who cares? I don't care kind of attitude. It's no big deal. Get off my back. Leave me alone. My attitude just changed so much. The only thing that mattered to me was when I get to drink again and have fun. I just want to have fun. That's how I looked at it until I was introduced to the disease of the information on that this is a disease. My drinking was mainly limited to weekends, but I know that at every opportunity I took advantage of it. About a year later, I was introduced to the wonderful world of drugs, which allowed me to stay conscious longer before that inevitable blackout hit. Because I drink whiskey out of a bottle with a beer chaser. That is the way I drink. I'm very serious about that. And I found that I blacked out too quickly. I wasn't somebody who wanted to be sleeping through life. I wanted to be in the middle of it. And I wanted to stay up all night long. I'm a night person. I love the night. And I wanted to drink all night long. And I couldn't do that at this rate. And I found some help. And I found that if I took things like speed or acid, that I could stay up longer, remember longer, and drink longer. And that was the whole point of the story, was to drink longer. And so my kind of diet became a bottle of whiskey and a hit or two of acid. And that was basically what I did the last year and a half. That was my goal of the day. And I didn't think anything unusual about that at all. I drank when I was able to drive. I was a driving drunk, and it was my party on wheels. And when I ran out of booze, then I would drink in the bars, and you bought. But it's interesting because I have two alcoholic girlfriends, and I'm very glad to say that one of them is now sober again, about 9 months. I'm delighted about that for her. And the other one is still back out there drinking. But I remember that we used to get in that car of mine, and at this time I was living in a small town in North Dakota, and you could drive about a mile and you were out on gravel roads in the country, and you could drive around that same mile and it looked different every time. You know, you never got lost, but it always looked different. When Fridays have always played an important. Lots of things seem to happen to me on Fridays. They are still my favorite day of the week. But 17 years ago today was a Friday, and one more time I'd be introduced to something I didn't want, and yet, as I said, would be the only way of life I want to live. But 17 years ago on Friday, May 2nd, 1975, I was committed to a hospital for alcoholism and drug addiction at the age of 17. And I would be in this 4-week program, a total of 7 weeks. And while there, I would learn a lot of information about the disease of alcoholism. I'd be introduced to some of our literature, and I'd be taken to outside meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous on Friday night. Now, since I'm not an alcoholic, there's really no reason to sit up front and listen. And so I would sit in the farthest back corner of the room and watch the other people up here talking, doing the same thing that they've been doing for many, many years, since the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous, telling their story. And I thought it was really great for you that you looked like alcoholics, that if I ever got that old, I think maybe I'd quit too. I'm glad you got here. But I'm young, and I've got a lot of time left, and I've identified with that line in the book. It's not verbatim, but that we always think that there's plenty of time left, and that's exactly how I felt. They say I drink too much, that I have a problem. I don't think I do, but I don't have any choice in being in here, and so I'm just going to stay and sit it out. And that was my attitude. And so I would sit in the far back corners of the room, and I guess the easiest way to tell you what I used to be like was to tell you how I found the differences with these people. Now, naturally, they told me to find the similarities, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to find the differences, because if I find a similarity, that means that I might have to say I'm an alcoholic, and those people don't drink forever. And I'm not interested in forever. At 17, forever is a long time. I didn't hear one day at a time. I reinterpreted everything that I heard. And I would every now and then tune into these people, and I would make my rationalizations up here. But the problem was, and I wasn't even aware of it, is that in my own small way, I was beginning to identify some of these things had happened to me in a much smaller scale, but that's how I rationalized it away. They talked about losing their family because of drinking. Now, I looked at that as, I've never been married, I don't have any children, and I wanted to lose my family. That was not a liability, that was an asset. They were on my back more than I wanted them to be about my drinking and all this kind of stuff. So that was how I rationalized it away, and yet I knew that it was necessary for me to leave, because my father and stepmother could not put up with my kind of drinking and my behavior and my attitude any longer. They were at the end. They talked about wrecking cars, totaling out cars. I thought, no, I've never totaled out a car. Not really, not officially. I had a little drunk car that arrived to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know how you drive them off the lot when they're nice and square, and then we kind of round them out with the drunk bumps. I had a little drunk car, but never had officially totaled one out. They talked about drunk driving charges and things like that. No, didn't have any of them either. And the reason is because I knew all the cops on the force. And when I would be stopped for drunk driving, they would take my booze away and say, Deb, just go home. Just get home, okay? And that's why I didn't have any drunk driving charges. They talked about being in these places that I was in, these hospitals and treatment centers and things like that. And I thought, hey, some of these people are making vacations out of this. This is not my idea of a good time. This is the only one I have ever been in and the only one I'm ever going to be in. And fortunately, that has been the case for me. And the reason I was even in there was because my father sought professional advice, and this is what they told him to do. He was tired of seeing his daughter commit slow suicide. And this is what they told him to do, and that's what he did. It was not a voluntary situation on my part. I did not think I needed any kind of help, but this was the situation. But I failed to realize that I was in one. I was not in there for too many donuts. I was in there because some people thought I had a problem with drinking. They talked about jails and prisons and things like that, and I started looking around the room and I thought, my God, there's a lot of criminals in here. And I'd never been around people like that. Of course, to me it's kind of funny today because my husband Johnny, who many of you know, and he will be talking tomorrow, he'd been in and out of his first prison before I was even born. And I always think it's kind of funny or cute that his alma mater is San Quentin. Where would he and I ever meet, but except in Alcoholics Anonymous. But they were talking about things like that, and I thought, that doesn't apply to me, because every time I've been in jail, it's only been 3 times, and every time it was a misunderstanding. And yet all 3 times had been drinking related. And so these are the kinds of ways that I did my best to rationalize. They talked about losing jobs. Now, I hadn't, it took a while to remember, but I had been asked to quit from a few. I had been fired from a few. I always seemed to have some little job I was working at. I don't know how that happened, but when I was there, I was a good worker. But I had a problem. I would quit in blackouts, of course, and I didn't know I'd quit, so I just show up the next day, you know, ready for work, and lose one more embarrassing situation there. But these are the kinds of ways that I rationalized and justified why I was not like you, and the small ways that I was beginning to identify. But there were 2 things that I couldn't rationalize away, and one of them was they talked about all those broken promises. And the face of my father came to my mind first, because I had there'd been so many, to the point where at the very end, the last year or so, I wouldn't even make them, because there was a game where we'd play where we knew that I could probably keep whatever promise I was making for 2 weeks, and the promise would always have to do with drinking. You see, I learned, as I look back at some of the conversations I had with my father, and some of the things that I encompassed around him, I know that I'm an alcoholic. And I know that he is not. You see, I remember one conversation. I don't know why this stands out always for me, but he had said to me one day, "Why can't you just have a couple? Why do you always have to get drunk?" Unknowingly, I answered him in absolute truth, and I didn't even know it. I said, "I don't know." And I really didn't. I knew I had never ever one time wanted to have 1 or 2 drinks. I never wanted to just start to feel it. I wanted the whole deal and beyond. And yet that he could do that, and could not understand why I could not. And I didn't understand why he did. And I also know, because when we would make these 2-week arrangements, that by the end of that 2nd week, you see, when he doesn't drink, he feels better. When I don't drink, I feel worse. I am Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in reverse. It's when I'm dry and not drinking that I start to feel all the stuff on the inside. And it's never love and gush. It's rage and hate and anger. It's just all the stuff that I don't want to feel. And that's when that Mr. Hyde seems to come out. And yet, when I take a drink, I start to relax and I feel better. And that's when Dr. Jekyll is available. When I'm nice to people, when I have lots of laughter, when I feel good. And you see, that's not what happens to him. He has no change when he takes a drink. Now, he can't drink enough whiskey to become an alcoholic. I've seen lots of people try to become alcoholics by quantity. It doesn't work. I have never read in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, perhaps I've missed it, where it has asked the question, we have had to have drank X quantity in order to become an alcoholic. No quantity minimum required here. It is the effect. It is the effect. When the effect takes place, and finally the day came when I could no longer stand the effect, and the effect wasn't happening anymore. But that wasn't yet. saw how I had all those broken promises. And the other thing they talked about, and I had never once disclosed this to those two drunk girlfriends of mine, they talked about trying to scrub away the smell. And even today it gives me some little goosebumps, because I knew I had tried to scrub away the smell a lot of times. And honest to God, I know I'm naive. I was then, am today, will be forever. And I did not know that was booze coming through my pores. And that's what they said it was. And I knew, the scary thing was, is I knew that they knew what the smell smelled like. And they said it was booze. So those were the two things I couldn't justify. And it was a little too close to home, because it scared me. The smell scared me, especially when they said it was booze. I was hoping I had some rare disease or something. I guess in a way it's correct, but I wasn't planning on alcoholism. After 7 weeks of being in this institution, this hospital, they sent me to an all-women's halfway house. I arrived there on Friday, which was June 20th, 1975. I'd be there a total of 9 months. And when I arrived, they told me these were the things I had to do. I was not to drink or take any drugs. Okay? And I had to go to at least one Alcoholics Anonymous meeting a month. Okay? I can do that. And so for the next 7 months, that's what I did. I did not drink or take any drugs, and I went to one Alcoholics Anonymous meeting a month, whether I needed it or not. In my opinion, I did not need it, but I was too dumb to go to the movies and sign my own little piece of paper, so I went. And I finally, it was during this period of time, this is why I know that another reason I know that I'm an alcoholic, because see, for me, just not drinking doesn't cut it. Just not drinking is not the end all to this way of life. I have got to do something in addition to that. Stopping drinking is only the beginning to help the bugs get out, help the fog lift. But if I don't take these steps, which are the things that will change my life, one day I will drink again. I am not immune to that. I have got to keep the actions going on a daily basis. Because during this 7-month period of time, I didn't drink. And that was all I didn't do. I didn't change the way I looked, or acted, or dressed, or behaved, or anything. I kept all those same little stupid images. I kept every phone number from the people I used to drink with very fresh and current. I didn't change anything. I knew I would drink again one day. I just didn't know when or where. I knew I wasn't done. I just wasn't. And so finally the day came when I came to California. I went to visit my mother on a 2.5-week holiday. The first week I was absolutely miserable because I wanted to be drinking and using with the friends I was with. Naturally, I didn't call Alcoholics Anonymous. Why would I want to do that? And in the last week and a half, I was right there drinking and taking drugs with them. And the problem was that something was wrong here. It must be California. It must be. You see, the fun. Where was the life that I used to feel when I took a drink? The problem was that I remember being physically so drunk, up to my eyeballs, laying flat down on the carpet, face down, and yet my head from here up is very clear. And all that is running through my mind is the things I heard in Alcoholics Anonymous. Let me tell you, it will ruin your drinking. If you ever go back to it, it is not the same. It ruined my drinking. There is nothing, and I agree with this, whoever said it is so true. There is nothing worse than a belly full of booze and a head full of AA. It is really not fun trying to have a good time drinking when you're thinking about AA slogans, you know. What happened to me, because I couldn't get off the floor, and yet I knew I should probably, was I kept thinking all those symptoms that I had heard people talk about were just magnified in front of me. They had always been there from the first day I took a drink. I knew that, but for some reason it was like it was not me it was happening to. I had never one time in my life been able to control my drinking once I took the first drink. Never had I been able to predict my behavior once I took that first drink. When I take that first drink, the craving is installed and I will do anything to get it. And this is what happens to me. This does not happen to my father when he takes a drink. It happens to me. I returned home and I took the attitude of I've learned my lesson. And I went from one meeting a month to one a week. One meeting a week sounded like an awful lot of meetings to me when you're sponsoring yourself, and that's what I did. And 5 weeks later, on a Friday, I got a letter in the mail that had one lousy joint in it, and that was the 6th of February. Like any still uncommitted alcoholic, I decided to keep it, you know, just in case the day may come when I need to take the edge off. I just didn't know it'd be the next day. Of course, that was the only thing on my mind from the time I got that letter. I learned a great thing about that one lousy joint. I will do it just because it's there. I will take it just because it's there. That's why I don't put myself in those difficult or slippery situations. Because I know how easy it is. I know how easy it always was. There was very little thought. I just did it. When I woke up, that was the morning of the 7th of February, and I think of all days of an alcoholic's life, whatever their February 7th was is my favorite day to hear about. I love to hear about it. When I called my friend this morning to wish him a happy 10th birthday, I said, what were you doing 10 years ago today? I always want to know. Because I don't know when you're going to get this gift of sobriety. And I do believe it's a gift, and that's what I've understood in our literature, that it is a gift. There's a kit of spiritual tools that says it get laid at my feet. It's my job to pick them up. I had the kit supplied to me a few times before, never bent over. Never bothered. And now I didn't know it would be time. But I woke up that morning and I had no idea that would be the last date of this, that I took anything. I take my sobriety date on the 8th of February, the beginning of a new life. I did not know that my life would be completely different from that night to this. That for the first time I would be willing to go to any lengths. That I would come to that point of confusion and conflict inside I had never known before. And I haven't known since. But it was enough. That one lousy joint was the thing that kicked me off the fence of indecision and reservation I didn't even know I'd been sitting on. And yet that's what it took. I don't know, like I say, when you get the gift of sobriety. And I don't think any of us really knew. I would have probably picked an easier day to remember. I would have picked something maybe that rhymed or that was cute or something memorable, but it was not for me to pick. And I believe that, and I hope this day never comes, but should the day ever come when I pick up a drink, it's not because the gift has been retrieved. I don't believe that. I think it's because I gave it back. Here, no thank you, I don't want it anymore. That's how I feel about it. I don't think God's, I'm bad, so I'm going to take this gift of sobriety away. I think I just quit keeping it in tune. I surrendered that night. and my life began a different journey. When I returned the next day, on the 8th of February, I went to the old-timers. And to me, an old-timer was anybody who'd been sober longer than I'd been alive. And at 18 years old, there was an awful lot of them. There's still a lot of them at 34, but I've always kept myself around old-timers. I went to them and I said, how do you stay sober? For the first time, I was interested in knowing and willing to do what you said. And they said, well, this is what we do. And they said, well, first of all, of course, we don't take a drink or anything else, one day at a time. We're regular in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. We study the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We try to carry this message to others. We take these steps, and we get a God of our own understanding. That has always been to be the best member in Alcoholics Anonymous, just for me, not for brownie points or not for any public recognition, has always been the thing to shoot for on a daily basis for me. Now, I will be the first to tell you that has not been what has been attained every day. There have been several periods of time when I am not very proud of my behavior as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I got sober, I probably did more things sober that people only did drunk. I started to live life. I was coherent. I started going out there and doing things and experimenting and doing, like I said, I'm just going out there living life, and I've learned a lot of lessons. I've made a lot of mistakes. But the one thing I never did was stop going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, no matter how good it got, no matter how bad it got. I never, ever stopped going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was drilled into me. And my first, I went from one meeting a month to one a week to one a day, and I was going to meetings every day, and I was following these old-timers around, and I got very active in Alcoholics Anonymous activities, and I would do the steps as best as I basically could, and I didn't have any real direction. I don't blame anybody but myself just for not seeking it out. And I seem to get through okay on activity. Now, I know and I believe that activity alone will not give me ongoing comfortable sobriety. I must take these steps. There is no getting around it. I was telling some people the other day about a sign, little slogan I recently saw, and they had said, "Do not confuse motion with action." And how appropriately said. And if you don't understand what that means, to me the easiest explanation is if I have an amend to make or an inventory to write, I can go to 300 meetings a week. I can pick up 45,000 newcomers. I can brew 800 gallons of coffee and be so busy. I mean, I've sped the world clock around. However, that has not written my inventory, that is still yet to be done, and that amend still has to be made. I need and like and enjoy the activity, but it will eventually not do it anymore if I don't do the actions, and those are the steps. That is what changes my life on the inside. That's what the change happens. And so I did work the steps, take these steps, as it says, as best as I could. I had written an inventory, and I had written subsequent inventory. When I was almost 4 years sober, a month shy of that, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and it would be like a change in the way that I did Alcoholics Anonymous or had it in my life. I arrived, and I had a sponsor there. I know that women should sponsor women, men should sponsor men. However, I had asked a man to be my sponsor. He was and is still 27 years sober, longer than me. He was and is the best example of Alcoholics Anonymous I saw in that area. And I took his home group to be my home group as well. And I started doing some self-sponsorship. I didn't know that at the time, but this is what I moved into. And I decided that since I'm new in this area, I'm just going to kind of kick back and see how they do things here. And I'm going to observe and just, because they don't care how we did it wherever I came from. I need to adapt myself to the way they do stuff here. And so that's what I started to do. But you see, the problem is that I made the decision I'll go to 3 or 4 meetings a week. Well, whenever I do what I think is enough, I usually cut the number down, and that became 3. And in a period of time, it became the 2 regular home group meetings a week. I know as a result of that for myself, that is not suitable. That does not result in the kind of feeling of sobriety that I want. That may be fine for others, but I know that through this unintentional experiment, that does not work for me. As a result of it, I can tell you what happened in a nutshell in 2 years period of time, and it's so gradual. That was the scary part, is it happened so gradually. I had arrived going to a meeting basically every day. Now, 2 years later, I'm going to 2 meetings a week. I used to arrive at my home group. Now, this wasn't every meeting, but my home group meeting, and I still do this today, I arrive an hour early. And now I'm arriving about 5 minutes before the meeting starts, getting my coffee, and if there's a newcomer on the way to my chair, I'll shake their hand before I sit down. I used to stay and be one of the last people to leave my home group because the meeting after the meeting is fun. And now I find that it's sort of like, amen, shake, shake, okay, see y'all next week, bye, and I'm gone. This is what happened in a 2-year period of time, and I'm wondering why I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. Alcoholics Anonymous has become something that I attended twice a week. I might have been going to an art class. I mean, that was about what I was giving Alcoholics Anonymous, and yet this is my way of life. And I'm wondering why I'm feeling restless, irritable, and discontent, and I thought I found the answer 3 weeks later when I met this little fella. And what I want to share with you, the reason I share this particular year is because that I don't ever want to repeat it. I don't ever want to be the kind of member of Alcoholics Anonymous I was at that time. And I have yet to meet someone who has not experienced something, whether it be with a man or woman or parents or children or their job or their property or their whatever. It's called obsession. And I have seen that happen to so many people, and it certainly happened to me. And I met this little fellow, and I thought, hey, it's an omen. It's a Friday night. Must be good. He's single. That's even better. He's got a lot of money. That's great. And isn't this something? He's been sober for 13 years. Now, he hadn't been to a meeting in 3 years, but no problem. I'll help him. And we'll just get to going to meetings and all that. Everything will just be great. I never one time consulted whether or not he wanted my help or not, but by God, he was going to get it. And this would it was as if the light switch of insanity had been turned on inside of me. And in retrospect, of course, I saw what happened to me is that all you would have had to have done was replace this little fella with alcohol and drugs. You'd have found the exact same personality 7 years prior. Because my whole world had revolved around alcohol and drugs. The whole who, what, when, where, and why of it. And now it was beginning to revolve around a human being. This little fellow was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. And this is what I began to do. He really had nothing to do with it. And it was during the next 3 months that I just absolutely thought of a lot of terrible things. I thought about suicide. Temporary suicide, of course, nothing permanent. You got to make sure it worked, I thought about running my car up against those guardrails or running it off a bridge, but jumping out in the nick of time. Getting drunk at him as if any of these things were going to do something. But it was all against me, and I was just crazy. I was telling God exactly what he was supposed to be doing down here, and he wasn't paying attention. This guy should do this, and he should do that. And I was trying to run the world, trying to run the world. And I was absolutely miserable. The only thing that my only saving grace was I never stopped going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, because as sick as I was and as ready as I was willing to just about sell out every area of my life there, I just did not want to take a drink again. And I knew that would be the eventual future for me. And I saw that I knew this. The minute I made the first excuse not to go to the meeting, the second excuse would come twice as fast. I've seen it. I have seen it. You deliberate and debate over that first one, and the second one is no problem. I also knew that the minute I made that first excuse not to go to the meeting, I might as well go down to the local liquor store, because that's where I'm going to be ended up pretty soon. I am a relief seeker. And I am very grateful that I know in my case there are only two ways I get relief. There has never been a third alternative. I either get relief through alcohol and drugs, or I get relief through the steps and traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. Not one time has that relief ever come in another form. Maybe in my head for 15 seconds, but nothing long-lasting. And finally, the day came after 3 months of this whirlwind romance, of which I was the only one involved. God had thrown a roadblock that I could not deny, and the guy got married to somebody else. But I was a good sport. I let him go, and big of me, right? And it's like I went around the corner and bingo, there was another little fellow with the same qualifications, and 3 months later I married him off to somebody else. So it wasn't a rip-roaring year for me in that kind of a sense, but what happened is that I finally came to the end. I surrendered. It was like a bottom out in sobriety. I was at the fork, and the next step was the determination. And to me, what kept going through my mind is you're either in or you're out. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. That line is in the first line of step 6 in the 12 and 12. And I knew I wanted to be one of the men. I knew I wanted to be one of the grown-ups, one of the big people. And so this is the route I took. Well, about 2 weeks later, I went to a convention, and the Friday night speaker was Jerry J., who was our speaker tonight. And he talked about people, places, and things don't make me happy. And at that time, he was talking about his drinking. And I am thinking, I've heard this a million times, and this is exactly what I'm looking for in sobriety right now. Now, I altered the words to fit me more appropriately to be men, money, and mansions don't make me happy. But it was the same principle. The next night I heard the speaker say that if I have family business to take care of, I better take care of it before they die, and I say I wish I would have. Well, I wasn't ready for that, because the person that came to my mind was one last amend that I had to make was to a stepmother. I'm almost 7 years sober. I knew the day would come when I imagine I'll make it. I just didn't know it would be that night that I would get the answer that now is that time. And I went back and I took those steps again with my sponsor with a pair of fresh eyes, and as if I had never taken them before. And I did one inventory, and I haven't done one since. I knew I had, for me, not that I had not wanted to before, but this cleaned out the bottle of my barrel. And I knew, while making that amend to her, that I was free. I was current then, I am current today. Being current is very, very important to me. And I lived on that good feeling for about 1.5 years. And I'm 8.5 years sober, and I'm sitting in a meeting, and I'm wondering, why can't the enthusiasm just stay all the time? I mean, why does it come and it go? And why? And a guy gave me the answer in a meeting, and I'll tell you, I'm so glad that I didn't get up to go get coffee or go to the bathroom, or somebody did that to me and I would have missed that, because I believe this, and I don't mean to make it sound wooey or dramatic, but I believe that if I would not have heard this, you would have a different talker here this morning. And the reason is because, number one, I don't ever want to be the reason you don't hear something. I don't ever want to cause you to miss what may save your life, because this saved mine. It has never left the forefront of my mind since he said it. And he didn't even make a big deal out of it. He was just part of his talk, and that was the only thing I heard that night. He talked about feeling restless and irritable and discontent in sobriety, and he said, you know, I was starting to realize I'm trying to live today on last year's program. And it still just gives me those funny chills, because that's exactly what I had been doing. I didn't realize that I had made that amend a year and a half ago, and that was a year and a half ago. And I haven't really done anything much since. This is the day that I have to make the contribution. This is the day that I have to participate in my sobriety, my recovery, get into this, give, to be of service. This is the day. There aren't any badges or medals that I can polish up every night and then put them on and then go around the meeting and say, well, see, now, this is when I took that inventory, and then, oh yeah, this is when I took a newcomer to a meeting 8 years ago, and, you know, stuff like that. But in a way, there are badges and medals of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll tell you where I found them. I found them in the eyes of the old-timers. They wore the badge of sobriety on the inside, not the outside. I looked in their eyes, and they were standing still in their own skin. And I didn't know how to do that. I looked in their eyes, and there was life, and I wasn't seeing that in mine. They had a glow about them that was just elusive to me. And that's where I have found, I mean, they didn't have to tell me they had a God of their understanding. They showed it. They lived it. They talked softly. That's where the badges and medals of Alcoholics Anonymous are. And so this is where I have gone. This is why I say thank you to the old-timers. Thank you for being here. And to you, thank you for allowing me to participate in your Roundup and for allowing to make a contribution to my sobriety. Thank you.